Hello everyone. If you can believe it, we are about to start our last panel on the last day of Atos Tech Days 2021. And the topic is quantum computing. So without further ado, let's welcome our speakers. Here with me in the studio, we have René Martin, the Trustway Business Unit Director at Atos. Welcome, René.
Okay, là.
And connected, we have two speakers. We have Steve Suarez, the Global Head of Innovation for Risk and Finance at HSBC. Welcome, Steve.
Hello.
And we also have Professor Vicente Moret-Bonillo, Senior Member Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers from the University of La Coruña. Welcome.
Hello.
René, let's start with a question with you. A lot of people are talking about quantum, but do you feel like they really know what that means?
Quantum computing is poised to upend entire industry from finance to cybersecurity to healthcare and beyond. Quantum computing is the processing of information that's represented by spatial quantum states. By bringing into quantum phenomena like superposition and entanglement, those machines handle information in a fundamentally different way to classical computers like smartphones, laptops, and even today most powerful supercomputers. Researchers have long predicted that quantum computers could tackle certain type of problems, especially those involving doubting numbers of variables and potential outcomes like simulation or optimization questions, much further than any classical computer. And indeed, quantum computers could dramatically change the world and how we approach real-world problems like financial portfolio, management, drug discovery, logistics, and much more. That's precisely what we are going to see discussed to this session. Our two guests, Steve Suarez from HSBC and Professor Vicente Moret-Bonillo from University of La Coruña, are both part of an exciting project that is called NISC, in which Atos is of course involved too. The NISC project, Next Application of Quantum Computing, brings together academic experts and industrial end users to investigate how to develop a new breed of quantum-enabled applications that can take advantage of NISC. NISC is Noise Intermediate Scale Quantum System in the near future. NISC is use case driven, addressing practical problems such as drug discovery, CO2 capture, smart energy management, natural language processing, breast cancer detection, financial portfolio optimization, option pricing, quantitative risk management, and so on.
Thank you so much, René. So Steve, going over to you, how is HSBC involved in this project and what kind of use cases are you exploring?
Yeah, we're focused on specific use cases in finance, and I think René mentioned option pricing. However, we're using techniques and exploring wider applications in the financial industry. So things like Monte Carlo simulation, quantum machine learning, and optimization problems. At the bank, we're looking at applying these techniques to various use cases, like fraud detection, risk management, collateral optimization, and reverse stress testing, just to give you a few examples.
Same question to you, Professor Moret. How is the University of La Coruña partnering with NISC?
To answer this question, let me go back in time when I was a graduate student in theoretical chemistry at the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. There I met a brilliant professor, Dr. Julio Casado, who taught me lots of things, especially quantum chemistry. But life decided that I should work in artificial intelligence, and this is what I'm doing since 1988. Then, some 10 years ago, I read a paper on quantum computing, and I said, hey, I understand it, unbelievable. And as a professor in the Faculty of Computer Science, I understood that our graduate students should know something about it. And I had a meeting with my dean in which I proposed a course on principles of quantum computing. He said no, because he said that the quantum computing was more a guess than a fact. But I took this no as a yes, and I began to prepare by myself and for free a series of seminars on quantum computing that are now in the web page of the faculty, and my students are familiar with the basic aspects of quantum computing, and I also have the classroom full of students. Concerning the second part of your question, my participation in NEAS is mainly due to my interest in practical applications of quantum computing and in the way Atos presented the project. use case oriented project, which is encouraging to me. I contacted with Dr. Andres Gomez from CESGA, which is a very important technological center in Santiago de Compostela. I presented my use case, and my use case was considered as potentially relevant. Atos included my use case in the proposal, and the proposal was funded by the European Union. And this is all the story.
Well, I know that we're definitely glad you took that no to be a yes. Going to Steve now. So JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs recently announced positive results around risk calculation via quantum computing. How does this affect the field of finance?
I think it's an exciting time to be in the financial industry, especially with quantum computing coming out. And we need to make sure that we can take advantage of the quantum power. But we need to make sure that the technology is mature enough and commercially viable. And so in that, what we're doing is making sure we're preparing our people. That's educating our people, focused on what the capabilities are, how do we upskill them? And also from a development perspective, for our technical people is they have to learn how to program in quantum. It's very different in programming from classical computers. So I think it gives us a good opportunity. We don't want to be caught flat-footed and looking at quantum. We want to make sure that once the technology is viable, once we have enough qubits, our people can go ahead and hit the ground running. On the opposite side of that, it's important that we're setting the right expectations and we're able to kind of separate the hype from reality. So we need people to do some POCs, some proof of concepts, if you will, on quantum computing, but also separate where do you use quantum computing and where do you stick to classical computing. And also understand where you could do a hybrid approach. So where can you use the quantum computing power and the classical computer coming together to look for use cases in that. So I think the final note is that timing is going to be key. We can't move too quickly because then you spend a lot of resources, but you definitely don't want to be behind when this kicks off. I think there's a big mover's advantage when it comes to quantum.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense, the time to market. So, and your quantum program uses quantum programming platforms, is that right?
Yes, we look at different platforms. We're not dependent on a certain platform, obviously, because the uncertainty of the technology stack between the hardware and the software. So we're exploring different quantum platforms like Google's, the IBM's, the Microsoft, and the Atos as well.
When you're exploring these platforms, what do you look for?
Yeah, good question. We look for things that are user-friendly, and we want to make sure it's as generic as possible. So we are definitely hardware agnostic. So we're looking for platforms that people have already have well-known programs around algorithms. We're also looking for a platform that has an active community of developers so that we can share best practices and share tips as well.
And I have another question about this. Is HSBC interested in mostly testing known algorithms, or do you also see value in developing new quantum algorithms?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a little bit of both, right? So we want to do known algorithms because that helps us do both benchmarking on the solutions and the hardware. There is value also on the new algorithms. I think I mentioned earlier, developing and doing development on quantum computing is very different than the development on the classical computing. So we want to give our team the ability to have that paradigm shift on what they need to learn and drive that. And you can only do that when you're developing new algorithms.
Thank you, Steve. So going over to Professor Moret, within sorry, I think I said that wrong. You are currently researching breast cancer diagnosis and therapy. What value can computation bring in this area?
Well, let me put your question in context. Medical informatics has fast evolved in the past 3 decades, but the original ambition of being capable of constructing systems that cover the whole of medicine have not been realized yet. Rather, we still see a wide variety of handy applications covering selected disciplines, and at the same time we face a big data reality where clinical details have expanded due to technological advances. These developments lead to the reintroduction of highly specialized centers for computing and for data interpretations, and we have to translate vast amounts of information into knowledge. The scope is enlarged to astronomical proportions, but the promise is still the same as it was in the 90s. In this respect, we have to take into account that, for example, computers can store huge amount of medical data. Also, we can use computers in medical applications, many medical applications, such as medical imaging or clinical decision support systems. And definitely, the computer technology has revolutionized the field of medicine. But also, medicine is a perfect field to investigate new approaches of computer science in general, and in artificial intelligence in particular. This is due mainly because medical knowledge is basically heuristic, medical knowledge is intrinsically symbolic, medical knowledge is uncertain by nature, medical decisions are often based on trial and error approaches, and this implies that the role of computers in medicine has changed from simply faster and accurate monitoring systems to expert programs that are capable of enhancing the real skills of the physicians by means of the construction of a second opinion. But we have to be able to accomplish the task. We have to be the model of expert knowledge that emulates the actual behavior of the real expert. That means building a computational model of intelligent behavior in the target domain. In other words, we have to follow the protocols that the real expert follows when faced with a clinical case. In the field of oncology, for example, we have to model a sequence of tasks, like, for example, evaluation of symptoms that may support the hypothesis that the patient could have breast cancer, performing an analysis and screening, acquisition of additional information that could help to confirm or discard the hypothesis. If the hypothesis is confirmed, then we have to perform the staging of the breast cancer. And once we have the stage of the breast cancer, we have to prescribe the therapy. Also, finally, it is mandatory the follow-up of the evolution of the patient. However, this is a very time-consuming task in both design and execution. And this is why we are paving the way, the great attention to the new technologies, such as quantum computing, in order to verify whether or not they can improve the performance of classical approaches.
Thank you. So I'd like to continue on this theme that you touched on. How can we model clinical knowledge in oncology?
Well, let me say you that since 1956, artificial intelligence is a hot topic, but even now it has a long way to go. It is true that there are already many applications in the field of medicine. For example, since the pioneering expert system ISIN developed in 1975 by Shawley and Bohannan for infectious diseases, lots of developments have been successful. And we also find artificial intelligence applications in cervical cancer, for example, in skin cancer, or even in treatment of certain breast cancers. My experience in the field is related with the weaning of patients from mechanical ventilation, intelligent systems for management of patients in the intensive care units, diagnosis and prognosis of the fetal state, and intelligent interpretation of sleep apneas. But, and there is a but, building intelligent systems in oncology or in other knowledge domain is a difficult task that needs a well-established methodology that even now does not exist. Modeling expert knowledge is the goal of what we call knowledge engineering. And knowledge engineering is a discipline that is part of the artificial intelligence and whose purpose is the design and development of expert systems. But this should be supported by methodologies trying to achieve a computer representation of the human knowledge and of the human knowledge reasoning. And the work of knowledge engineers consists of extracting the knowledge of human experts and coding this knowledge so that it can be processed by a computer. The problem is that the knowledge engineer is not an expert in the field to be modeled, and the expert in the subject has no experience modeling his own knowledge in a way that can be represented in a computer. So, since the task of acquiring knowledge is a difficult task, several stages have been identified to approach this work in a more systematic way. For example, we have the identification of the problem, where basic concepts are learned. We have the conceptualization, where the whole process is organized. We have formalization, where the concepts and particular processes are analyzed in depth. We have the implementation, where we convert the acquired knowledge into software. And finally, we have the testing, where we analyze the performance of our intelligence system. This implies to assume a whole methodology.
What is the main purpose of your research in this field?
Well, this is an interesting question. We have several goals to complete, but perhaps the most important one is to find an efficient method to translate classical knowledge-based systems into quantum rule-based systems. That means that we are trying to take advantage of all the characteristics and properties that make quantum computing a better tool than classical computing to perform some calculations. This is the main goal of our research.
Thank you. René, I'd like to circle back to you because at the beginning of this discussion, you said that quantum computing could change the world, and you didn't say that it will change the world. Is there any doubt that it's going to come to fruition?
The real question is not if quantum computing will become true, but when. When will a quantum computer be available? And this question is really relevant. We have been speaking for a long time about quantum supremacy, also called quantum advantage. The quantum supremacy is defined as the time when the power of traditional quantum computer will overpass the power provided by traditional one. We believe that it could happen in about 10 years. This event will generate a real cataclysm in the world of cryptography. Indeed, the underlying principle of legacy asymmetric cryptography used today will no longer be efficient. As an example, if you look at the RSA algorithms, the name RSA comes from the name of the inventors, Rivest, Shamir, Adelman, which is the most used asymmetric algorithm today. We know that its security level decreases to 0 as soon as the quantum computer appears. This is due to the Shor algorithms that will be able, as soon as the quantum computer is available, to carry out a factorization of big number, which is a complex mathematical problem on which RSA is based.
So we had a session earlier today about security and sovereignty. Does that mean that all of that will no longer apply in a post-quantum world?
For sure. This revolution includes rethinking the way to ensure security and sovereignty to the issue addressed by the scientific community. Under the impulse of the NIST, the National Institute of Standard Technology, an American standardization organization, a worldwide competition has been launched aiming to specify new cryptographic algorithms. This will cover the needs for signature, encryption, and cryptographic key negotiation. And when we think about the impact of implementation of these new algorithms, we often think just about cryptographic equipment. Of course, they will be essential in the process of this migration, but in reality, the entire application ecosystem will be affected. This will not only affect back-office application, but also application on workstation. An obvious example is the secure access to websites, and in particular, e-commerce sites, but not only, of course, which must be takes into account this new threat. This means that both browser, web server, and interaction with bank payment system are concerned. Generally speaking, we must consider that all applications have to evolve.
Listening to that, it's not really clear if we should be in a hurry to adopt quantum computing or not.
I would say it depends. If in some industries, such as defense, several types of data are processed. Some data have a lifespan, a very short lifespan, so you could consider that there is no operational urgency to migrate. Others have an extremely long lifespan, so over 10 years. So I think it's very important for them to proceed to this migration. The urgency of the migration directly depends on how long you want to maintain the confidentiality or integrity of the data. For some companies, it would be a matter of survival if their data becomes public.
Thank you so much, René, and thank you to all of our speakers on this panel who are connected, Professor Moret, Steve, René. It's been a pleasure to do this deep dive into quantum with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, that is all for me. It has been my pleasure to host this Atos Tech Days 2021, and I now have the honor of leaving you with the much anticipated grand finale event, the prestigious annual competition for scientists across the globe, the Atos Joseph Fourier Prize. Thanks, everyone.